Welcome to episode 5 of the U.S. Essential Business Podcast. In this episode, we go via Zoom up to Birmingham, Michigan, and we're going to talk with Mr. Dan Rogers from the Griffin Claw Brewing Company. Now, I've known Dan for about 15 years, and in my opinion, he is one of the best brewers that you will ever meet. He knows how to make some good beers, and like I told him, I don't think he knows how to make a bad beer. But Dan has adapted his business like all of us have that are still open. And we're going to find out, what is he doing that's somewhat unique? How is it benefiting frontline responders? And how can it benefit us as well? So we're going to go up to Dan. One of the things, too, I wanted to mention that different states have different guidelines as to what's essential business. But here in the state of Michigan, breweries are an essential business. They're classified as that. And even though the pubs are closed, we can't go to visit the tap rooms and get a flight of beer. There's other ways that we can get those amazing beverages. But Dan's doing something unique, so we want to talk to him right away. So let's go via Zoom up to Birmingham, Michigan, and we'll meet Mr. Daniel Rogers. With us on our next edition of Essential Business, we have Mr. Dan Rogers. Dan is the brewmaster at Griffin Claw, which is one of the best breweries in the state of Michigan. And Dan, let me talk a little bit about how I feel about you. Was doing a lot of stuff with beer a few years ago, met a lot of brewers and sampled a lot of beer, and your beer was always the best of the best. And I remember talking to you one time. I was in that little office that you had at your first place there at Big Rocks, and you gave me a sample of beer, and it was an IPA, and I said, "This is the best IPA I've ever had in my life." And you said your goal was to be the first brewer east of the Mississippi to win the World Beer Cup for IPA. So what ended up happening out of that beer?
Well, I sent it in. That was year 2010 World Beer Cup. And back then there was only really West Coast IPA was the new big IPA. None of these hazies and all this stuff they're making now. West Coast was the big one. So, which was very clear, very bitter, and very light in color. And playing around with it, I just eventually hit the nail on the head and entered that beer. I remember you tasting it, and then our distributor, Rob Powers, and his daughter both tasted it. That was the same day I sent it off to get judged, and they both said the same thing. They were like, "Wow, this is awesome." And I thought I knew right then. And then a few weeks later, 5-6 weeks later, at the award ceremony, I won the gold for Norm's Raggedy Ass and the silver for Bonnie's Raggedy Ass, the Imperial IPA, which is a little bigger version.
I do have a story to tell you. On episode number 2 of this podcast, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Steve Matthew. He lives in Ohio. What his company does, they service bridges across the world, suspension bridges. They do cable wraps. So he loves going to Metro Airport, well, before the shutdown, right? Because he could always get Norm's beer. And I told him, I said, "I know the brewmaster." And he goes, "Next time I come up to Detroit, you're going to take me there." So Steve and I are going to make a little field trip over to Birmingham, Michigan. But yeah, I don't think you know how to make a bad beer. And your story of how you became a brewer, you're working in a restaurant and they wanted to make some, thought about getting into the beer world, and you went up to the boss. How'd that conversation go, and what was the application like?
Yeah, that was back in Las Vegas. I was a chef for Big Dog's Hospitality Group. We had several locations, and I ran a couple. Then I heard them talking one day. They wanted to open up a brew pub, and I had been home brewing at the time. There was a nice homebrew store in the town in Vegas, and I started buying kits and making beer. And once I heard he wanted to open up a brew pub, I called the secretary and said I'd like to meet with Mr. Wiesner. And she's like, "You're not quitting, are you?" I'm like, No. I just need a half hour of his time. And she said, "Okay, how about tomorrow at 10:30? And I said, "I'll be there." So I brought 2 coolers full of all my home brew. It's probably about 18, 20 bottles, I'd say, different stuff. I was making all different styles. Back then, there weren't as many as there are now, the styles of beer. But I walked in, he said, "What's up, Rogers?" And I said, "Well, I heard you wanted to open up a brew pub, and I want to be your brewmaster." And he said, what do you know about making beer? And I opened up those coolers and started setting bottles on his desk, and he started opening them. And after about, 8, 9, 10 bottles, I got the job. So the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
uh, I love that story and how that changed your career path for the better. That was pretty awesome. And you do make some good beer. One time I was Dawn and I went to Big Rocks for our anniversary, and I ordered your Imperial Stout that you had aged in a bourbon barrel. I had that at the end of the meal, and the waitress comes around. She says, "Can I offer you some dessert?" And I said, "I'm actually having dessert."
Yeah.
That beer is so delicious. Hey, the purpose of getting on, and first of all, thank you so much for joining. The podcast is essential business, and people might say, "Well, how is beer an essential business?" But you're still brewing, and it's for pickup only. You deliver out to the cars, but you're doing something I think above and beyond just making beer. So, how has COVID-19 affected the way that you're conducting your business, and how are you and Griffin Claw adapting?
Well, naturally, the tap rooms are shut down, so it's only curbside delivery, and people call in their orders, and we can get them food to go and beer to go. So that's what we've been doing the last several weeks here with the shutdown.
Right. And besides making beer, you're making something else now, right?
Sanitizer. So uh, we're actually brewing washes too, and the main thing is we can distill at the brewery in Rochester Hills. We have our distillery. In the past, we've been making vodka, gin, bourbon, all different types of spirits. And last fall, we just bought a big 1,200-gallon stripping still. So I can take barrels, 40 barrels of bourbon wash and strip it all at once, and then we do a spirit run. But that was the key for us. Really now, kind of worked out well for us to make sanitizer fast and in bulk. And we've been uh, buying back beer from our distributors that would naturally be going out of date now, because
Hmm.
who knows when restaurants are going to be able to open again, and bars and tap rooms. And so we're bringing back our beer and cleaning it out and distilling it, and making hand sanitizer.
Now, when you're running it through the stripping still, what's your alcohol percentage or the proof that's coming off that still?
At first, it comes off at about 40%, and then we run it through a spirit run, and we can get it up to 70% or higher. But we'll cut it down to 70% for the hand sanitizer.
Wow. So obviously there's no flavor, no smell. It's pretty much very close to pure alcohol. And how are you, what else are you adding to that? Because alcohol is very thin. So are you doing some sort of gel, or how do you, what's the process after you have the alcohol?
Yeah, we can denature it with glycerin or even like aloe vera and things like that, and we denature it so you can't drink it. You don't want to drink it.
Exactly. Do not drink this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how are you distributing your hand sanitizer? I understand some of it's going to first responders, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, police stations have been getting it from us. Local areas like that, we've been giving it to them, and we're sending gallons off to state of Michigan. They've been buying it, hospitals, so numerous places.
That's
We're
pretty
selling
awesome.
it by gallon jugs.
Okay. So could people just show up at the brewery there in Birmingham and buy a gallon there, or how's that working?
No, not that volume, but people that order food to go will get a 4-ounce spray bottle. And
Nice.
I think I got one of it. I can get it and
Yeah.
show it to you.
Yeah,
Hold on.
absolutely. That's really cool. That
So
looks pretty
they're
thin.
yeah, a little 2-ounce spray bottle. Um, get that with every order of food you pick up to go.
So
We've
is that
also
just
been selling boxes of vegetables and fruit uh, to go for people that want to get that instead of running to the grocery store. They can pick up their hamburgers or whatever they've ordered online with us, and get some of those to go. We'll just drop it right in your trunk, and away you go.
Wow. So that's pretty good. So they can get some groceries from you guys as well.
Right.
Talk about some of the changes you've made in your brewery, Dan. I know in a brewery you're not typically working over each other. It's not like an assembly line where people might be inches apart. But what changes have you had to make in the brewery, or anything to adapt to make sure that you're social distancing, or as I like to say, physically distancing each other?
Yeah, we're kind of down to a skeleton crew. Mostly people packaging up hand sanitizer uh, in the gallon jugs or these little spray bottles. It's kind of tedious work, but we do the social distancing, and we're down to a skeleton crew here.
Okay. Any other opportunities open up as a result of these changes that we're all going through?
Well, I'd probably see this hand sanitizer as one of our products we're going to continue making, because I'm sure it's going to be in demand for a while after all this ends, but who knows when it's going to end. But I think it'll be a viable product for us to keep making.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know what the new normal is going to look like. We keep talking and wondering what it's going to look like, but I think it's going to be a long time before we get back to the shaking hands and the hugging and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think I said in my last episode, I hate the elbow bump, but
Yeah.
it's kind of the new world that we're going to be emerging into, I'm guessing. Now, Dan, you're always just kind of closing with your penchant for experimenting. You come up with some pretty interesting and unique ideas for some beer. Are you using this downtime for any special projects? Maybe not necessarily beer related, but anything that you've kind of wanted to do and just didn't have the time?
Yeah, I can play around with smaller batches of beer here at our Rochester Hills facility. We have it's a 20 barrel system, but we can brew 10 barrels of beer on it. Even for the distillation, I can play around with doing like 100% rye malt whiskey, mashing that, playing. That's what I'm doing right now, is getting that process down. But really right now we're just been concentrating on the sanitizer and cleaning out all this old beer.
Yeah. And we had a phone conversation a couple weeks ago, and you made a comment. I'd never thought about it. You did say you're buying back beer from your distributors, but there's also scores, or let's say hundreds or thousands of restaurants out there that have kegs of your beer, and it's just sitting there.
If they already tapped it, it's their keg, it's their product,
Right.
We wouldn't take that back, but.
Got it. Yeah, which is it's sad to think that there's gallons and gallons of delicious beer that's sitting in kegs that will probably go bad. But we really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much for your time getting on the call today, and look forward to getting back in the Griffin Claw and doing another flight of your amazing brews. So keep up the good work. Anything else you want to share with us, Dan, before we let you go?
Oh, just everybody be safe and wash your hands, and get some of our sanitizer.
There you go. Wash and sanitize. All right, Dan. Hey, great talking with you. Good seeing you again, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Dan Rogers for his help with this episode, and really appreciate to hear what they're doing to help out our frontline responders with our doctors, nurses, police, and fire, hospitals around the state of Michigan and perhaps beyond. So thank you, Dan. And thank you, too, for your crew that worked so hard to make sure that this project has been successful. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please forward them to me. You can use my email address at cbellinger@linksystems.com, or you can reach out to me on any social media platform, perhaps where you're getting this from. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button below, and you'll make sure that you don't miss any upcoming episodes. So until next time, we remind you to be safe, be careful, and above all, please be kind.